That is direct cross, right? Let's use a real symbol. Oh no. Shoot. I don't do that. Oh. Why did I get signed out? Sign in. We'll get started here in just a second. I'm just fixing the Zoom situation.
Yeah.
Can we sign back in there? Okay. One person online. All right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, da.
그냥 그냥 주자고 주네. 그냥 주자고 좀.
치모. 그렇지도.
예.
Okay, that's how much to delay tomorrow.
Yeah, so hello, greetings, welcome.
Ani dang ngarame Lobsang Wangyal. Ani tanda andola ki ngoto na na ji dang lo ni sanga do da nang chu na la lo jong chi. Ta ti ji la gushi ki ti tonje. Ani tanda ti dala ani di engineer de jang ti nyam da na chu mo tre ti chi de.
My name is Geshe Lharampa Wangyal. As I said earlier, I studied Buddhism for 25 years at Geshe Lharampa Monastery, and and I've also been studying and practicing English as well. Come on, we're just getting started. Please welcome. There's water, tea, coffee, and back. We're just doing introductions. This is Geshe Lharampa Wangyal, and I'm translating for him. So I'm saying I, but I mean him. I studied Tibetan Buddhism for 25 years at Geshe Lharampa Monastery, achieved the degree of Geshe Lharampa. And I've also studied English.
아니 다 드링이기 조지드 카르다미나 다 시바당 심다 심정스야기 조지티스야 참말라 드라이어 땡기도 아니 디스 인트레스나고 지도 티 카르친 담고레스 바이나다 나추 나올로치당 다 타와타 템존도 큐바츠야메 바다 딘젤라소바게 나자 마보시기 요르디 티 참마데다 시바스야기 남자데 메바이메나 다 디소야 초민주서로다 조지주사메 바차도 딘딘자 So
the topic of conversation today we'll say is like consciousness, mind, right? So translating these words sometimes in English is a little hard because we don't have the exact words. We'll say consciousness, right? The general term for consciousness, and within consciousness we can talk about what we call main minds and mental factors, like these divisions of consciousness, and explaining that. And this is really important in Buddhism because in Buddhism we talk about the view of things like emptiness, independent arising. And all of these depend on an understanding of minds or consciousness, right? So if we don't understand minds and consciousness, then talking about things like dependent arising and emptiness have no meaning.
Tenita nanchu seon di kidangi ta tsire tunrengi ni pa jashiba shiba yana pe ta lojong jiba yana lo ni tsakatang ne lojong ji sayu jike ane jijiri ina ya tsu de ba yana tawa temjang kibat same ba se ge ni non tsin du yore ti non ta tawa temjong ge korde ngazo ji tsiridan temba jibe ina ngazo desendeshi jib to yore ni kyoba gshoni da chamba ta ni ji sewa ta tani dli jimre se at so samadane shiba ge namjati shiba se de hama ko bayina shiba ge namjati me bayina 다 조반 쇼기 주만 보지 맞은 데시 겹도요 말 시바데메 바이미나
The job of people that love get the money.
주단 다 타와 템존 주바 체ame 바니다 다 타와 기쇼니 단가 주 템드레사가 나브자 시르단 템베 토니 맞은 데시 겹고요리 다 조바 쇼기 주만 보지 맞은 시바 나브자데메 바이나 데시 겹도요 말
So to just really sort of briefly summarize like the two most essential points, if we wanted to say really essentially what is Buddhism, we can talk about the view of dependent arising or the view of interdependence and nonviolent conduct, right? And so the view of interdependence in many ways is very compatible with science, and in some ways can be understood through science. But when we talk about so that's the wisdom side. When we talk about what we would call the method side, the side of conduct, in this you have things like sort of patience, compassion, sort of working for the benefit of others. And when we think about wisdom, really, without wisdom, we can't practice any of these, what we would classify under conduct or actions. Without wisdom, we aren't able to practice these other things.
tanda 참말에 트월레기 요리 시바세드 간데세하기 트와티 토만레기 용거레 시바세야데 당어서 민도 차바야메나 다 즈키 퐁보르와 대당 냠데 데 댕게지레 야나 티기 모지레 티칸데레 시바디 카와 요리세야노 야나 시바세데 즈키 퐁볼레 타데데 요레세야기 다 참말 트와 요지리 신데 요지레스.
So when we talk about consciousness or mind, right, the question is, what is consciousness or mind? Okay, so as people, as living beings, we have this these aggregates of form, right? So what is the relationship of the mind to our body? When I say aggregates of form, that's sort of jargon, technical words for essentially our body, right? Sort of. And so what is the relationship of our mind with our body? Is it totally separate from the body? Is it one entity with the body? You know, what is that relationship? Yeah, this is a question, that we should think about that comes up, right? What is the relationship between the mind and the body?
다시 생각했던 배 시바세야 되고 아주 폼볼이 타데디요 바티 스보차가 요레스. 아주 시바세야데 말좀 뒤게 폼보 딜리 타데디요 바다 남바산지미나니 숨게 요레스.
So in Buddhism, we say that the mind and body are different things, essentially. That the technical term tade is essentially different. That the mind isn't the body isn't the mind. That they are separate.
드니다 시바그리직도 다 남시사는 아주 미강서 받지바이마이나 남시스 시바티 뭘 반로죠. 딘디자다 시바디 가와니 토막 도와친 레인조지 지긴 젠지기츠 시바 드브잔조레베 컨드레스나다 남비종고 노올레 시바디 지직지기 즈직지기 다서 시빙고 주비오 말레스. 그 규티 지마잉기 다 그런 게 시바디 그런 게 계지고 그러마도 아니 시바게 주쟁게 변하면서 폼보기 아니 시방고 주위요 말이지.
시방고 그래?
그나 파미기다 크라이오로. 딘디기 아니 지체발레트니 시바 트라이오 말이지.
아, 오케이.
주스는 주쟁게 폼보요.
티기 시방고 말이.
주체 말이 그 주데요. 주체 그런 거 닐링 주데 아니 주데요.
So when we think about mind and body being different, so we talk about mind not possessing form, really not having form. So then you think about what are the causes of the body and the mind. And so when we think about the causes of the physical body here, right, we have the sort of the sperm and egg. You have the physical matter of the parents coming together and creating the body. But because the mind is not form, right, and by form I sort of mean physical matter, then the mind can't come from something that has form because it is essentially formless.
다 아주 시바신 지원도 잠바레 남시 세나리. 다 시바 때다 남시 코론디 아니 토마메바니 당아주 토마메바니 코론 토만디리세아지 menjo 미 강자 게르지 기와이나 토만디츠 자 menjo 마투 줄레기 연주 되니시레스.
And so because of this, when we think about mind, really in Buddhism we talk about mind essentially having no beginning. That there is no point at which you can say the consciousness began. So there's this unbroken continuum of consciousness.
tanda 시바테 아니 그런 게 뭐 간데지레 젤리 간데지 다텔레 연den가리요레시 라와야베나 다 시바세야 돼 저런 게 지다 남시기 뭐데 그런 시 세리기 차인죠 즉 드라마 옛날에 당아도 네게티브 에모션스 어때 소 옛날 거도 한기가 랑질라고 랑질 드리면요 고 장네 소소 냠len다 딘디기 진이 장바 얌바이나 지 시바기 간리요 딘디 드마티서요 세롱디요 바고 바 윤조 세롱아서 바스웨토
So when we talk about trying to understand consciousness, we can think about like what are its qualities, what is its essence, what is the definition, what is consciousness? And so one way that we think about consciousness is that it's you could say clear that I think you could say that's the sort of clarity aspect of consciousness. And what does that mean? That consciousness has this aspect that it will take on kind of what it contains, so that if you have sort of bad thoughts, bad actions, it takes on that quality. If you have good actions, it takes on that quality, right? So it has this ability to sort of take on other qualities.
근데 인사다 시바세야디 맞아 지 드마디 코 람질라 메바 세롱 임바 인사 다 남비 모네티 단네 다 레짐데슨 카르스 키아니 다 산지 콤볼이야 도토게 요요레 다 지금 남비 추케밀링게 임바 이나야 수수기 니레긴 수이가 데케 임바 이나야 시바세야다 다 티기 단네 지 수수 데케 드와야라야 나 케베지 용게요레스.
So we talk about one of the qualities of mind or consciousness is because all of the stains, all of these sort of negative things that you could say are adventitious, and that they're not of the nature of the mind. They're not naturally present in the mind. This means that you can get rid of them, and because you can't get rid of them, this is how we talk about achieving the state of Buddhahood.
시바가 남자게 시바들티스 키바제바임바이나 소소 시베달티스 장바이나 디스키베 용요르스.
And so really in not just talking about achieving Buddhahood, but really whoever you are, whatever you believe, if you can understand your mind better, and if you can become good at understanding your mind, then through that you're able to live a happier life. You're able to have a higher quality of life.
텐센도 다 데센 마시오디 시베나라라 다르몬보 용요르고 시바게 지 말레베차 레베차 시바가 나라 몽보 용고요레 따티나는 뻔나 말레베차스나다 니모그릭 직제 니모 미게웨차 미게와스나다 야포들라 또 포지티브 그촌이 게와다 안 네게티브 그촌이 다 니모그릭 몽보요라 니모 몽보요레 뜻 참아 시바디나라 츠드데요레스 텐잔다 가서 시바자 간데 예마키 시바데 키바체 티 차타네다 니모그릭 나 키바스나 텔레티스 수수 공르체 바임바이나 tatila karsina donlen sina mandu ti nyamlen soso个 kalingen trebi kapse semga tapena kontro tabushi yimbaina ta shiba gan rotondo te hago yimbaina ta kontro te tso dina donlen jiwa chala so donlen jiwa odile pendo yunguyores
sanga tsode ti migewe ki chatang gewe ki chati shiba ki
ta shiba ga ritlan kiba chebaina tela nga tu nimolan kiba sindo na ju no la tini peke tangbaina nimolan kiba ta nimolan kiba se ondi nimon sina ta digi tirwata tika muba kare namba kare mo kare o tindile yang kiba yamba ta susul kibin ta nachu naza ajanjare tini mayimbe gi chu niregin so yitoliya this donle jawal pento.
So we can divide mind or consciousness into many different types of minds or consciousness. So there's virtuous minds and there's non-virtuous minds, things like anger, hatred, all of these things. And if you can come to really understand the different types of minds, particularly like if you think about something like anger or ill will or virtuous mind like patience, if you can understand what is the essence of this mind, what is the function of this mind, what is the effect of these kinds of minds, if you can really learn to understand those, then it's very beneficial for you.
Ta shiba se adi ko jeondi tambala ko gyokare koreyan yurjin ta shiba se adi yurjin le ngonzi yore yurjin se de korore yirchi yore tani korangi ani kibi gyomike da kintini ki shimambo yungero ta shiba se adi ko negative kande positive kari me so pasho ki ko yirka chani ko yungero ta yurte yur jetang chani yur jetang pena ta panzimi shin roji chashana pesa ba yemena ta ti yir jetang chani ani tidang shiba digi ani korgi simjong mambo yora tiso kun ani shiba karsan negative cholan rola yana positive cholan rola tindik ani yirka chani ko yungero yir jetang chani.
So one way we can think about minds is that minds are, the literal translation is object possessor. And what that means is minds are something that can take an object, right? So like if we look at, for example, at this cup, a mind is something, whether we're talking about main minds or mental factors, any kind of mind in our divisions of mind. A mind is something that is able to apprehend an object, right? So that's one of the primary functions of mind is it is something that has an object.
다 알아서 컨트롤 답을 찾아봐 옛날에 너차 답을 찾아봐 옛날에 다시 유르체 단계 미 로지라 컨트롤 사서 지지라 옛날에나 티겨도 지용도 잠바 시바 컨트롤 디기 티겨도 지용도 딱 컨트롤은 손대선다기 손대주어라 남식 시바식 콜로 연구 로파티스고 양 콜로 드라타야라서 바기 제니 단다 텔라무비 시바데 코론 그래서나다 배 컨트롤
중근데 대선던 중근데
손대요라 티 로파친게 냠도 시바치레 양 다긴 손대 시바젬바 모비용요라 단 손대다 지슨데시 냠도 딱고 시바젬바 콜로 로바 연게츠 kon 티 컨트롤 나바 고는 지르샤가요스 인사다 컨트롤 해야지 저거 심 마게완로 차디요 티그 남바가 니모고 초데고 파세론 요바레스 세론 파 소프트
never said
메바조 투그레서 그런 시바 그런 세리로 세리 차이와 이나야 그런 게 세리 차이인바 이나야 당아서 티 다기 그 니모고 초지도 니모데고 란실라 시바디 란실라 시기요 말이야
So if we think about minds like anger or desire, right? Both of those minds, say would take an object, say take a person as an object, right? So in the case of desire, of course, you have a person as an object that you like, and in anger, you have a person as an object that you don't like. And when the mind takes an object, it's not just a single mind, right? You have a main mind that's taking this object, and you have all of these other sort of connected aspects of mind that are taking the same object at the same time. And through understanding the aspect of anger, like if you understand anger, you understand the function of anger, and you understand that anger is bad, then you're able to apply an antidote and make that anger go away.
그런데 심정도 시에서바이나 자 기본의 창조도 친조도 다단데 시바이나야고 시바세야도 르데용바이나 조다다 셈당 셈정세 아니나 츠딕데 버리 시바카레네 시바모 데요로 다 셈제온디 잠발라 아니 코 콜리아 셈정세 어디 코 콜리 용구요다 벤나가조 티 베샤바이나 자본지바이나 콜 레갈레 로몬보지요라 오티라우들라 셈정세 다티 셈정디 고원기 다 셈데 칸데 마케와조아다 지 드라만라 gewa chabayenda nyamo chayemba simja ropati onge chigiyores ta tanda control da chabayenda control te simchi khol doyona tik khorge simja momboji ki ko ropajin nambajin doyore.
So now we'll talk a little bit about the visions of mind. So we have this top level of mind that we would say is consciousness or maybe just mind, right? And so we can divide this into types, right? So two types we can talk about are main minds and mental factors, and this is jargon if you've never heard it. Basically, the idea is that the main minds, they all are taking the same objects, as we just said, and the main minds and the mental factors work together to apprehend this object. So you have an example like of a king, right? So when you have a king, you always have this retinue of people that are sort of hanging around, right? So it's sort of like that. This idea, for example, if you have anger, they're all taking the object as anger.
로파가 심정돼서 온 지기요래 다 돼서 저와 같이 옆에 당겨요나 아니 뭐 봤으니 스위치하고 되용기로
and so you have the main minds and these mental factors, and the mental factors are sort of what determine sort of the activity of the mind, and if you understand how all of this is working, with a mind that's like afflictive, you're able to know how to work with it and make these afflictive minds go away.
다다기 경우 당보디 시바데디 간데리 기모데 시바레 티파릭 데와임바이나 데와임바이나 심자지데 심정세 아니 용여로 다 심정세 데 심세온데 잠보츠 다다 시바케 조데 체코르티 티간레 아니 심정세 콘코르데게레 다 심데다 다나조 공이 원실라 템베 남리 시바 나 야나카 다 남비 종고노 카시기 트루데 다 트루데요로 된 덴데 도니에요레 다 티나니 다 이기 남리 시바사데 나조 간자 디르와 간자 patsi ba yema ina yukin number shiba tsi de yoro ta ti number shiba se adi ke kolia semjong se tang jong khashi ke nalo ya ane semjong ngap chu se ro ya semjong dun chu se ya ta teso zu nga so ngo je tunji ke semjong ri dire ta ti mai be ke ya semjong ta mo ma je mo bo yo choban ro re ta na bi jong na men ta sha de semjong ngap chu dang ane ngap chu cha chi ta dun chu tin di sungu yo ro.
So when we look at these main minds and the mental factors, so the main minds, there's different ways to break all of these things down, but just to state it simply, you can think about 6 sort of main mental consciousnesses. You have the mental consciousness, sorry, I should have said the 6 main minds. You have the mental consciousness, and then you have the 5 sense consciousnesses. And so those are understood as the main minds. And then when one of those arises, present with that at the same time are these mental factors. And there's many different, there's 51, there's a list of 51, there's a list of 70, there's different lists of these. And there's, of course, actually countless mental factors. There's many, many different mental factors. There's some that are more important than others. But we talk about there being one main mind and then this sort of circle of mental factors that are present with it.
다 맞죠 심다 심중에 나오자도 단다 win탄나 송 단나니 돈이지 되더라. 저다 그런 게 시바디 가리임바이나 셈네나리 셈정임바 가리이나미나고 뭐 라트 마진 통고요 말이 단다 셈디게 따티게 셈데야 마치와 차바이나리 한 데보차이 기보차이마이나리 디다긴 코그 셈정디기 드라마데 가르치기 요리 셈정게 셈정게 콜 구토죠 도 텔라 드로타 이 드로타니 야폰 셈정게 파나 심이나 딱 컨트롤가 요요와 따츠와 제아드기 가르 요레 쿠게 데두 라소반 통 야나티기 차퍼게 체슈 맘보지 통 요모디나 다 야이나 코요 드로타니 차파키 알아서바 안 디보인다이나 가르세나다 드로타니 마치바 차발라서바 따티 심정 공기 심들라 아니 고쳐 잡고 요레스.
So there's a quote there's a quote from the Discrimination of the Middle Way and Extremes by Arya Maitreya, which explains the different functions of these main minds and mental factors. With respect to that, the main mind sees just the essence of the object. The mental factor knows its characteristics. And so what the basic idea is that the main mind really just knows the mere fact of this, like it just knows that this is a cup, right? And then it's the main mind that takes that mere fact, it's the mental factors, the sort of, when we talked about the king and the retinue, these other minds that sort of superimpose characteristics onto that mere knowing of the object. And so, for example, there's many lists, right? So there's 5 omnipresent mental factors called intention, feeling, discrimination, attention, and contact. And these are present with every main mind. And so in this sense, like you have the discrimination factor that sees the cup and sees the qualities of it. You have the feeling that you know, if it's something good, that you really like it. You have a feeling of good. If it's something bad, you don't like it, right? So the main mind, the important point here is the main mind knows the sort of the mere object itself. And then all these other mental factors are sort of adding qualities to that object, or maybe not adding qualities, but apprehending qualities of that object and arising feelings about those qualities.
다 스도 데드 신하다 시바이바이나 다 시바자데 코롱기 람진디 워사레임바 텔라 체추카리요리라 바이나 넘바산지비기 시바텔라 존더 카제 땅바이바이나야 고모 야리야니 드니다 넘바 킬렘바이나 사마지 파투고 콘페타요 바지오레스 따티 페도서 카리샤가요레스나 penam tanamde nala yo penanga chu kaza to Geshe Lharampa chom jam dewa to kache chi ko chejing gram chi limitation do yores ko kache ji jangdar ta na parish ko samje den ko yajin ro amel te ni ma to meba ina shiba de gar se ba yemina ko kache ji kiti gal yarji tamba yana so ya mo kombani kache so so gitan basola pa yaji tame ba ro yon jo shibi zayati kechu tin ni yores ra.
One of the important qualities of mind, or the nature of mind, it's really important to think about, and we can use an example from the Tema Namja Pramana Vartika. It's a canonical text on sort of Buddhist logic. Is this idea that the minds really have no limit to their ability to be improved or worsened depending on what you're doing. So there's this idea of jumping, right? So if you practice jumping, you'll get better, at jumping over time, but there's going to be some limit to how far you can jump, no matter how much you practice jumping, right? At some point, you will never jump any further. However, minds don't have such a limit. Minds, there is no sort of limit to which you can change and improve or, your mind.
Tindi izada, ta nambi jongo noloya sheba indi tindi kita ko shiba di jondar tanya sena mendu shiba ki ngo seri tanya di ta korogo shiba di ka nyembo kari imba tele ya jong lo jongche penata control za ta wadan do chase ya ani nyemo guru lu tsugi yora nyemo imba ga shiba ga jile nyemo guru dro ta tik jondar ti ma choni tamala tele ya kiba che korta do chase ya karre an control za karre tik mupa kan rejiresha namba kan rejiresha te yapo shimo semba imba ina tik doshoni ta gomgures pen do chandro ji baina yer chilamini ko chilgi ba dro tanju kurgo ramji li gibi ke chadi gero tati maimba ko tata chi tik doshote maimba chi ko gom deba imba ina ta ko shiba ta ke wonsulin didi ge dro ta ge lot mai chongri chori doni ko sama chadu ibres tensanda shiba senamendo nimolan kiba seade ko shiba chi ki mo kare muba kare namba kare ti doshogon zitange mo kare sha muba kare tile ni jonta tanda
So when we're thinking about minds and we're thinking about, particularly we talk a lot about the afflictions, these negative minds in Buddhism, right? So one of the things is if you can really become skilled in recognizing afflictions, understanding sort of the aspect of the afflictions, like how they appear, understanding the function of these afflictions, like what they are doing in your mind, how they're sort of fooling you. And if you can really get skilled at knowing those and spotting those, then you also will become skilled at knowing how to counter them. So you will know, when we talk about antidotes, right? Each affliction has an antidote. So you have afflictions will tend to exaggerate the qualities of things, right? And so if you can spot that and you know how to apply the antidote to something, then you're going to get very good at actually sort of reducing these afflictions. For example, if you have if affliction of like real intense craving arises and you're superimposing these exaggerated qualities on that, you can meditate on the antidote to that kind of craving, and you're able to really reduce it and do it in a very specific and effective manner, because you understand what the mind is doing.
Ta tindi ke rigi nimo to zoma pantang den zoga nolo la pantang de rig sumzi shigi yore ane mupa pangba zeyate mupa ane mupa pangba se ondi tsamba ko mupa paki pena do chan ro ji ki yong yo bayina ta nga so mupa do cha kisa ki yurde kanza ji cha chana bena ta ane ko ko mupa ta pa sha bayina tele mi bin do cha de ane pandu yore se
Can I get chu kari chu
zo yo zo kana
zukina
zo jong yo dan
dejung zu
zo kana la sungu yore ngoma zo kana la
ngum zu
pansa sungu yore tinde inza ta ngarang ge ti chi nipan thoshi sinamen zo chi yakhshon de tungu yukara sen ta mupa pamba se ondi zamba maso nimu ru kai na pabji yi chi mupa tele tini ki yong yoro ta kyan ge ni pa yo na ani mupa te pangu yo pina ta den do cha chi sa ki yor ji yamba ina ta chu tele ka che mu de ina yor tele yang ju chapa chi yang ju mu de ina chapa de kale ka de ya pandu yo ta ka te mupa pamba se ondi zamba ti ki yor te pa panjan tele semba makro katina tele kati yang korna yang lojen bar ko tindina to ki dig do chan ma pangru yoris mata.
So one important aspect of this is that when we can talk about from Vasubandha's Abhidharma Kosha, one of the important Abhidharma texts that's studied in the Tibetan tradition. It talks about the importance of, you have a mind and you have the object of the mind that the mind, say, for example, desire. You have a person that you're very desirous of, and you have the mind, that is an afflicted mind of desire, and you have this object that you've exaggerated the qualities of. Well, the way that you want to actually work with this is you want to get rid of this exaggerated view of the object, right? So if you try to get rid of just the mind, as long as you have this exaggerated view, the mind's just going to come back, right? So what you actually want to do is get rid of this exaggerated view, and if you get rid of the object of this afflictive mind, then that mind will not arise naturally. So that's one aspect of this that's important to understand.
Tachide nimo wongi chi mashibe wongi nimo chi yongres paki yurte mashibe wongi tela drota nertan de chetawa jinde mishi ro yurte 야 보즈 마시베 온게 아니 뭐 어떻게 한 거였어 배는 가서 덴버즈 말하고 기어 인 거이나 덴버즈 미 뭐 어떻게 해 바이나 가르스나 파샤 그 유르테 덴버 메 바이 메 나자도 마시베치니 그 덴버에 삼니 때문에 따텔라트니 덴버에서 기기로 테 배나 배 라바직 때 시바이면 단 세나 세모지 사람 말합지라 다른 보지라 낙보지 통바이는 가서 미지레 삼니 제바이 바이나 미지레 때나 바 나가서 gondate wala sarpala nakpojila ta shindong ro yima cha
신동 그게
ta tharim bojil ta bayin bayin te mijiri samgro ta tel ta dena ji paru dotanin gode yuzu meri chunguyoro te karajin ki guyore pashu ge yirte mama yimba mashi be on ki guyores ta te ta ki denzel ba ja bayin bayina demba to be dembe karajin mashi be on ki guyores ta te ngaso lojon chen yirte yapo shi sam bayin bayina tela me be ta lo so tsama pangru yores
so when we okay, the afflictions arise out of ignorance, right? So the afflictions arise because of ignorance, and it's ignorance. So from ignorance we get this when we were talking about these mistaken, like if we have an object of attachment and we have these exaggerated qualities of the person, right? That exaggeration of the qualities of the person is arising from what we would call ignorance in Tibetan, sort of both not knowing and misnowing, and the word in Tibetan has sort of both understandings. And so of course, the most canonical, most important example of this is that when we look at objects, we see them as existing truly, inherently from their own side. We see objects as existing in a very concrete way that's not possible. And so from that, then, of course, we develop these superimpositions of emotion and affliction on top of that impossible way of things existing. So there's an example that's used in Tibetan, this idea that, as it's getting dark and you see a tree in the distance, so that the tree looks like a person and you think it's a person, right? So in this same way, under the power of ignorance, we see objects, but we see them incorrectly. And because we see them incorrectly, we develop these afflictions.
Okay. Tatini so domba bayana, shipakiri te tindiji digore. Ta nimos and ketang tindijin mupamandala tini kigore, papa bayan tik doshoki ta taki lavanajin by kigura, shibag and irritated to do the shibayamba and in the ta number sanjibi jongon all the shiba said taki share ta kawani yorese, one shiba the kawa yorese de Nengaji triumviro. Ta shiba said the Chananta, ten wambola, Nedin Kijiro, ta Ketan Zupo inama shiba tamal ma kept the shigi shiba.
The super market.
Mazupol Tamal Machap, Luke Shipandro Jinama, Chap de and Rutin Chadigura. Yore Sunguyota, Sunguyure. That thing also Marangi Cinnamon, that Samagi, that Siribag Shiva in that Samakaji, Siri wants to say that the Jabjungish Yungizina, that it's Sama, that one side chigri, Labag chigri, some euro. That tea can't let Leva Yembina. Tang also. Nambingoni by night, one second at Sirisha and Ajetipe, Kadugus killing Guaji Chadigure. In a tongue to Tilly Gibik, Tiki Jabjonla, and Shibasiaji. Shiba you are tick Pinata.
So just to review, we talked about this idea that from ignorance, right, we have these mistaken sort of objects of perception or understanding, and then from that, then we generate these afflictive minds that cause us suffering, right? And so then the question comes, well, where is mind? What is mind? We're coming back to this question of sort of what is mind? And from the Buddhist perspective, the Nangbe Chane, the Simtang Sup, the
Sumsen, Shibasan, Takawa Neore, Semondi, so Namshide, as Ninkala Nedi, Laura, Kanzat, Ninkala Yores. Tima in Beta, Lishi, the Shibatama Zubol Machamni.
Samala Kimni. And so from the Buddhist perspective, what we talk about is the consciousness actually sort of abiding in the heart center, what we would call the heart center, in that our consciousness actually pervades the entire body. From the scientific perspective, they think of the mind, as being sort of in the brain.
Tangarangi Chebayana, that three at the Indian Mashiva Samaimba, Masu Dolly Nabangu Shiva in Tingara, that she was that once the Seriganalti Sambu Yurada, Tita Mari Shibata Mari, so the Carino by Nalabichigri Sambu, That's a kuzo tindi samlo yojira. Ta tindi insata tigana da number to try you by na ngarang concept of the shiata tanda ta lapik matsu karsina lapik leka che de jiro lapa kana chili yoro tanda tanda sirgishe de adi ti nambi ngoni ta ti killing go ga ne ta cha yorisi ina tanda ngasu shiba zati ti jabjong la ta tanda nam samala ta dodo sheba yeba ina tanda wansa ta tsirik jabjong yomba yeba ina tanda nyawa ta labi chili re samage samlo yoro ti kanla ta twa yonda yang ne twa lengi la dan
ne kongsola de shepa ki lepa ki nyamen da bote lepa ki chele da bote sungi lepa ki chele kongsola
laba ki cheli yoro te ta shibe ki cheli ni ta kakanda wo cha de yoro leka kaka nami ngoni ne kaka cha de yoro ina labi cheli ta ngasu killing go ga ne ta cha ga woris.
So when we sort of compare science and Buddhism, we can ask sort of this question, right? Is the function of the brain and the function of the mind the same? I mean, from the Buddhist perspective, they're different functions, although of course they're sort of related and interconnected. So, and if anyone has any questions, now we'll open it up to questions. If anyone has any questions about the mind, the brain, from a Buddhist perspective. Oh, okay. No, we're gonna wrap this up first.
Conclusion Shiba said so ani Ramjin the Wosa Yimba. Till I joined the Tramayana, Yarjin Ruyoba, Nimonguri Bayina, the Ramjin la Mayango, Shiba Mayimba, Azuti la Nimbotini, Susu Jantan Yaji Ruyoba, Navja Chiche, Tatela Decimambo Yore, Decimambotu, Nanetang, Azun Negiti Chote, Azuma, Zenta Yopata, Zepama Zapayoba, Payoba, Payoba, in the rest.
And so just to wrap this up, right, really one of the most important aspects like this is understanding from the Buddhist perspective that the mind has this aspect of being sort of primordially stainless, right? So this means that the mind has this ability to be improved sort of endlessly, incredibly. And so because of this, because we are able to really improve our minds, because of the sort of stainless nature of the mind, we can apply afflictions, we can apply antidotes to afflictions and actually be able to get rid of them, totally eradicate them.
Tadi yan sambajila da ngazu jodi da nyelengi jodi. Zuching chuki shibaka ani juchi nyelen chiga meba. Nyelezen habo. Nyel habo.
Simgi lepa te simgi nyelen mare.
Lepa sena duta zuchi karena pena pamaka kutra yoro da kam martiso yoro. Tesu takashigiti pamak Nanda Ujibaina, Nikanamshi Judi, Niling Judi Parchi, Pamaki, Takwa Kamkarma, Gongati, the Soyinasami, Tanamin on the Mares. That Tigitonian, Trovata, Kandiovina,
So the other thing is also from, just to summarize, from the Buddhist perspective, we think about what we call in English the substantial cause. So it's helpful to think about what is the substantial cause of the mind, and can the mind substantially arise from the body, from form. So in science, and we often think about the human arising, and in Buddhism as well, the form of the human arises from the sperm and the egg, and you have this growth of the body. But from the Buddhist perspective, that body cannot be the substantial cause of the mind itself.
Okay, Susukiti Shiba Shiba de Matu Shiba in that young Desimambo the Doto Jinima Shima to do Chati. Tanabatul Tia Yoba Yomena, also Penzi Tua Tilicani Shiba Yomena, the Sibochagi.
Okay, so that's sort of just a real brief presentation of the Buddhist understanding of mind. Now we're open to, if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them clearly. Anybody? Questions? Minds? Buddhism?
I would like to ask, what is the Buddhism way to practice to improve our mind? Because it says that the mind is unlimited. But what is the Buddhism way to?
The nang chugi chane the sim yarke jogi tap karere.
탑세 따따기 시야들 심 얘기자디 니모치 바이나 ku doshok nimbo chiade tagi na sheja yo penan dochan roji chaja ba yemena ani dochak dosho de medibi tengin je se gumguyo tindi mom bagona pariko samani ani meba chandu docha za tuni kiya me ta na je controller ta data thamchi kiya zawade ta denjin se yatel tu de ta denjin dosho de me to be shirab se ta tomani to be lo komriche ani denjin zawa cheba yemena ta tinimoru zawa meba chandu
So from the Buddhist perspective, it's this idea that all of these afflictions, these minds, if you understand them properly, you can then apply the opposite mind, the antidote mind, right? And you're able to, by meditating or contemplating on this antidote mind, and whatever that mind is the opposite of, or the antidote to, will go away. So for example, we talk about craving or attachment, what you meditate on is ugliness or unpleasantness. And so by meditating on those two minds can't exist at the same time. And so by meditating on the opposite, you make it go lower and lower and lower. So for anger, the opposite would be patience. And then, of course, the most important, like the sort of deepest aspect of this is this idea of inherent existence or true existence. There's lots of ways this idea gets translated, but really it's this idea that we have this over concrete separate view of everything. And so by meditating on what like emptiness or dependent arising, you meditate on the opposite of that you eradicate this most fundamental ignorance.
그런 거랑지 많이 봐야 드라마부터 딱아요고 맞아 남매지 인도라 자자이나 다 바르니 켤라 드라마부터 그러면 가르쳐 봐야 임바이나 나 나는 누구요 다 나도 세다지대야 니마치니라 콜 연대 촌이다다 근데야 연대 그 촌에 테스타 연대 그 촌에다 다다기 말 마게지 제바레 디테 아직 그런 게 니마 온게 제바 요지라마요 그렇지 되냐니 티친도요 말이 삼바다 다 틴디 연대 촌에 테스타나 가서 내 요딩게 그 니모데리디 These tatamandawaji jundu yoris. Tatindi kondi tana parimi chula zadia kondo nyori.
So for example, if there's someone that you really don't like or that you're angry with, just by seeing them, you get angry, and then you're getting angry because just by seeing them you're exaggerating or superimposing all of these negative qualities on that person, right? So if instead of that, if when you see that person, if you really make an effort to try to think about good qualities of that person, or to really try to change that mind that's you're creating these negative thoughts. And so slowly by doing that every day, by really trying to change the focus of your mind away from these exaggerated bad qualities to the good qualities, you slowly are able to change your mind and improve your mind that way.
남비 냐블린 바티수 미틴디 컨트롤사사당 아니 도착기사기 예틴디 통부요 데바이메나 티 카랄라 공고요르스나 소솔 축제야기 코르코질라 살로탄기요르스 타기 컨트롤 세아디 조바지 공고요 다 콩알라 기와치아 토포치에서 땡알라 카티 침보였어 틴디 공바이메 타코 조바 컨트롤 텔라 조바메나 컨트롤 공게메나 조바요마 틴디 인사 코 틴디라 삼로탄에 코 파키 삼로탄한데 벤제바 시키침보다 틴디게 야냐 지요르스
So when a good Buddhist practitioner or yogi or someone who's really practicing Buddhism encounters someone that makes them angry or encounters someone that they feel strong attachment or craving for, they see this as a wonderful opportunity, right? Because when you see someone that makes you angry, it's this opportunity to practice patience. Without that object that's actually bringing that affliction, you can't practice it, right? So it's actually when you encounter a situation that makes these arise for you, if you're a good practitioner, that's actually really a wonderful opportunity to work with your mind.
Why does the mind need a body? You say that the mind is not a product of the body of the brain. So why does it need it, or the brain like that? It's vessel.
Yeah. Sim karitini Simla karitini supogore.
Tend Laura Tensade.
Tensare di good, Sungsong di
Tensa Laura,
Tensa Gus.
Tango Superman, she don't make a
The Supermena di Shepa Yoreve.
티 다 용거요 말았어. 다티 가르치. 아, 그다 스메카다 요 코저 트와션 바이나. 스메카 잉게버도 마탄 도바 칼로 마테 바이나. 도바 카바이 타이 코 텐사 딩오네. 타 타키 그 아주 시바텔 킨섬러죠. 옴보 오즈기침 바탕이 티술라 워다. 옴보 시바데야노 옴보 오너 즈친실레테니 키요레스. 시바그 파 데티 시바 바이나 코지 다킨지 고운도 다. 다킨. 네 테마타키. 무킨스 킨섬도. 타티 닐랭기 기데 우즈기 키요 마르디. 아니 다부 킨들 탄 도비 간사 칠 차자 바이나 르다. 아니 고 니버도 마키 롱게디 다 옴보 즈기침 바디. 고 요레스. 인자탄다 composition 사고로 ом보다 근데지라 때니 내나마도 니 셰동 때니 그거는 코네 도움도 타고
가르치고
신동 때니라 시바 내금도 다 미그 ом보티코 다 템드기 칭이스 남도다 간디나 티탄도 상완로 이지 때니지라 내고 가네 니양 아서 데게 가서 펜도들이 셰동 때니를 도와세긴도들이 니 마도 통화도 시동 그르로 네 시동 도와세 납신 내긴 도와세긴도 그때 남바기 아니래 잠바시 잡고 요레스 잠나마지 아니 시동 라틴 납신이 도와서 말하다
니네디 공기 렌나디 그래디 나저 다킨 디 숙보메나 디 다킨 디 그래서디 왕시 계기 말해
게토게 말했어
게토게 말해
다 차와다잖아 메기도 소이나 야 렌록바지 잡고 그러
So I got a little complicated because in the Buddhist understanding, there are different realms. And so we're in the desire realm, and all the beings in the desire realm have form bodies. There are other realms where that's not true in the Buddhist understanding. But in the desire realm where we have bodies, we need bodies because the sense consciousnesses, you have sort of a mind arises, you have the sense consciousnesses arise because of the external object, what we would call the sort of dominant condition, the sort of subtle organ, and the prior moment of mental consciousness. And the subtle organ is sort of a subtle form that you can kind of think of as the sense organ, but that's not quite right. But basically, you need the body, the form, to mediate the sense awareness through the mental consciousness. Does that make sense? But there's the form realm and the formless realm where this works a little differently.
그때 간사게 딘들라마도 셰동도 솔다 셰동 딘데월 키기요마. 세르는 땡도 대상. Like this. 딘디 셰동 주기인게 파타네 셰동 거주기인게. 셴동 타가로 셰동 부드수. 파 셰동 타가라렌도 셰금 발라. 파타네 셰동 이디니. 셴동 싱 발란디는도 통도 어디 뭐로
네네 신동 말해 된 것도 sem전이야.
다딘디 통도 막 가서 잠바 라군도 솔레 시반도스네 추추도 유군도. 다디 가서 대신 말이 the living being 잡으시고 this 아니 living being 말이지. 단디 간에 진들리게 오르세. 가서 시바자 디지 레용도 하고.
그래서 시바가 말해.
시바 요래라고. 시바 요래. 네. 다 거기서 시동래 라군도 양디. 시동 파타네 시동인데. 라군도 가시기.
그건 걔는 게 된서 하고 무슨 신동 때서도 레고요 말해.
तकी खोटवा कर रहे मिंजी मिंजी मी किता वंबो तेला ने गो कर रहे शिबा जंबाला नेवान दुआ तापे न दिन रोजी ने शिदों दान शिबा ने दो बुरिन दुआ से बुरवास तन दिसु छमा माछु पत्तन नंबर दि शिंग नंबर इना दिसु शिंग मारिस रो दि शिंग मारिस दिसु शिबा छमा ने आदे गासु मिला ने आना जिंगे तो को तेंग वंबो छमा छांदे योरिस तिन वंबो मा तो शिंग नाना छांदे योरिस
So we can sort of compare like plants, right? So plants don't have these sort of sense organs in the same way we do. So in relation to that, they're not arising a mind. Geshe Lharampa had the example of these sort of insects that look like plants. And so they look to us with the appearance of like a plant, but they because they have these sense organs, these subtle sense organs. It's a little complicated because we don't actually mean the physical gross sense organs that we can say. It's these subtle sense organs that mediate between the mind and the sense consciousness, that create the sense consciousness. Then they are able to generate consciousness or mind.
또
I don't
고소
think I explained that very well, but
또 고소를 나도 시바 내사기 땡다 어디 당이 버 원보세 가지고 그러왔어. 때 원보 요들이스. 근데 다 진짜 맞아 주보 고야게 점신들이스. 다 시발로.
yeah. So basically the idea is that we need bodies because we need the bodies to mediate the sense consciousnesses. Is that answering your question?
Like explain how it works, but not let's say of course we believe in reincarnation. Yes? So when a person dies and the stream of consciousness goes to another body, could be also an animal. Okay. Why does he need to go to a body? Why can't this stream of consciousness just stay a stream of consciousness? Is it because of karma? Just to understand what is the explanation.
가르치는 것도 통두 어to number shape the namshi the 가르치는 것도 연결 개월 링결 가르치는 namshi the this the bardela sulaje the yomanes
바르톨라.
네 가리나 그러니까 가르치는 것도 namshi the 중배제라
마시비질라.
마시웨제라 가르치는 the the 연결 개월 링결 가르치는 the namshi the sulaje the yomanes
그래서 대선하다고 저도 단 시바스나 단 남시스나 만도 그 계사기 제텔라 단 코하게 리투나를 내되기라.
the gym 생각해.
다키와 코키와 레온데 다 파르도 네 같이 반네와이 바이나 좀 제구 마도 내기요 말. 제구 파체린 키와 말레니 코타와레 참네 되바이나. 파티바르 코 리그 땡 거레스 레크. 레 코타와 아람 지는가 다키와 랭게메스 디아르 그 장스요 말고. 마타 다 마키와 랭게메스. 코 가르스나 그런 거 사샤비 레티게 온게 레타 니모니디게 다코 지장고 야나 니모니 숨신 양코 키알렘 바된 거 레크 땡 거레스.
Yeah, so the answer is karma, right? So when you die, your mind goes to the bardo, and you're there for a certain amount of time. But at some point, a seed, it's not like you just decide to get reborn. A seed of karma ripens, and that impels you through this process.
다디키 마장아 참이 라완다 냠렘 바다다 산지다 드니 토바 요바이나 코가 따키나 거 소소키알라 라완 레산나 키기리 단다 맞좀 코아는 니어디 담바 쳔마질 라완 요 마르코 코 레가 와로 레완 인사 코 레게 때용.
So very high arhats and Buddhas are able to actually control this process and do have the choice. They can kind of be born however they want, wherever they find is most useful. But we are being reborn and going through this process under the control of karma and afflictions. And so that's why that happens. Sure.
You were talking about the jumping, that the mind can continue jumping, achieving more and more.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the body jumps and the mind, it was an example, but yeah, the mind can continue to improve. Yeah.
So is that what happens when one becomes a Buddha? Isn't that
It's at the end.
되게 점바들 세제로 왔어. 상기는 걸 차도 그래서.
이게 상계의 이야기죠. 시기 여러분.
다 상기 사디 되니 이야기 다 상마 타투 서다디. 단데 이야기 로요나 코 상마지르다. 다코 상마 빵고야 빵 하고 시전 긴고 상마지. 다 상마 세사디.
Yeah, no, Buddhism is sort of understood to be, the state of Buddhahood is understood to be the end result. You know, there's really nowhere else to go. You've gotten rid of totally of all your afflictions. You've achieved it, you know, all the knowledge. And so you sort of, from there, yeah, you don't have to keep working. I mean, there's actually in the ground, I'm saying this, he didn't say this, the grounds of path is the path of no more learning. It's like at the end, just as an example.
디그 땡 시타기가 체제대 자요르스. 땡바세그라. 시바세야디 고 땡들와. 다티 땡바 니모고 르트마 르지모비오란도 트마티스. 다티라고 요르다. 근데 총바데 총와데 가이베이나 콘총사가 체체인자 고 대샤 버스 바르가리 가게 대샤가요. 다 출량 배샤가 요레. 추다 추그 차트지요라. 고 트르지요라 추그 트르. 다 추데 메간라 꾸데나야. 꾸나. 메간라 꾸나 바르고 감로라고. 감로 메바차도라. 다 시바데 데니 마레스 코티 간라 공기 띵기 트마도서 까제까제 땅 되바이나 고 시바데 메바차가요 마레스 고 야기 야 셈이 야긴도 좀
So we talk about sort of the basis, right, with the quality of the basis that we're working with here. And so in terms of jumping, the basis is the body, right? And so the body has these limits. There's an example of like sort of boiling water. If you just keep boiling water to sort of to clean it, the water eventually goes away. But the mind is not like that. You know, you can remove all of the afflictions and the mind will still be there.
전선도 다 졸업하세잖아 저기요 하고 당가서 시바세야디 근데 졸업하고 티 특파간라 리모트야나 지레스 시바세야디 특파티마 균로이나 리모트 메바 차두라 인티 아니 카르세나 메바 차두레스 당가서 시바세야디 티 zupo chashi samjires zupo ti me pare shindo no shibad me ba chandu res ko pesha do ta namba gi mares ko shiba za ta zupo le thati yores ko yangyo ko kiwa dil matro yemba ni kiwa chimala yajindo tini yajindo ni tanda ko choroba de zugo nije se ade matsu mambo kom deva yena ta kiwa mambo lo komba yena yajindo yore lavandi ko so tini kiwa ni mambo ka yo mares kiwa mambo yo mares shiba za de ki chang su sha yu mo na jires te chang de ma juno 메바 찬도레스 페데냐 zupola tendure zuposhine meta tanishiba 메바 찬도레스 네 ndi 마레스다 맘바테니 바레티 요
So there's an example that's we could an example that non-Buddhist practitioners use to talk about the mind when they would debate each other, and there was this example of like murals on a wall. And so if the mind is like murals on a wall, then then if you destroy the wall, the murals are destroyed, right? And so that same way, if you think about the mind as being sort of one with the body or purely a function of the body, then when the body goes away, the mind goes away. But in Buddhism, we don't think that. The mind and the body are separate in that sense. They're entities, they're separate. They have separate entities, so that the mind, when the mind goes away, when the body goes away, the mind continues. And because the mind can continue, you can practice these things from life to life over and over. If you practice compassion over many lifetimes, you have this ability for it to increase to incredible amounts because of that. You have a question? Sure, no problem, no pressure.
Yeah.
Anybody online? Any questions online? Okay, yeah. You guys have any questions?
왜 봐?
Anybody? No?
양심만 오더니 도스. 내가 말해 삼주 요나도. 내가 레그먼드 something 비트와 요나도. 아. Tidak dindugi mendu samse to deda yang continuity na samsung yang yora tapene tegi siwana jidang siaba yembe ne so nywa kyo tamje labag che deri lamde jora
labag de kare
tamazu manche da sirik roji maina tatso dewaji nyungure do charge ki yonte labag che li lagra laba
ge che
laba che sambu yoro tat dindin ro ta mazu tel lengare chu yore 티 라야가 저 탄다 세르바가 나올 삼루티 레바티 잡존라 탄다 틸리 잡라 아니 카르선 시바디
테 강라리 레바티 강
탄다 스티뮬레이션 라고요 레바기 살로 쳐야 돼 티 사마도 시바기 제기요가 맞아 타팅 하라네 사마딜이야 당아서 사마 녀브레 건데 티 마사도 체크하더라
So there's a lot of dialogue right now between science and Buddhism, and one of the big differences here is that science, has a sort of materialist philosophy that thinks that whatever happiness or suffering that we have is arising from the brain, right, from the actual organ of the mind. And Buddhism, of course, says that no, that it's actually the mind, this other thing, that's actually where all of these experiences, feelings, happiness, and suffering come from. And so. This is something we have to really examine and discover and try to analyze and think about.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, so much for coming.
That's all.
All right.
보바이나 치드 치 같아 봐요.